Just want to start off with our normal sort of way we start. There's plenty of events. We have a speaker coming up. David Peck from Better Bee is going to be coming up, and then after that we have wonderful speakers. David, I don't know if you've ever met David Peck or had to deal with him with Better Bee. He's an extraordinary scientist, and he is up to speed on everything bees, and he should be a great asset to our speaker lineup for 2024. And after that, we have Heather Matilla coming on, and she will be speaking on different aspects of queens and so on and so forth. So the next two speakers coming up are really great. And then from then on, we got a packed agenda for guest speakers all the way through 2024, with the exception of a couple of a month in the spring and the summer or something when we don't do anything. So check us out. Again, the event on the 24th is coming up after this Bee Talks. And then we have a bunch of guests, as I mentioned, to the end of, we're starting to actually get into 2025 now with our event list. And then I want to encourage you to look at our resource pages. We added a few wonderful resources there for you to peruse. One is a honeybee nutrition reference, and that reference you can see what it takes to keep your bees healthy, what kind of pollen they need, what foraging they require, how they gather pollen, so on and so forth. It's a great study by an organization that is well known, the Bee Informed Partnership. It's a 3-year study, so it's basically borderline longitudinal is the term for that, scientific term for it. And it's worth reading. They did a great job, and you'd be able to understand a little bit about what your protein requirements are your bees. So, and then we've added some other things to that. I'm going to add something I'm going to go over tonight with all of you. I'm going to add there a treatment schedule that I devised for everyone in the club that wants to follow it. So, but I'm going to go over that in detail tonight. All right, what's blooming? Anybody see anything bloom? No. Now, oddly enough, February 5th, the bees were out in my yard. So they were, it was 40 degrees. They don't fly, but they were at the entrance melling around. Bunch of dead bees had been hauled out onto the ground. It's not easy to see them these days because there's no snow, but that's usually a very good sign that bees are dead in front of your colony in the winter. And it is a good time, if you are thinking about it and you have the means to bend a coat hanger or something, get in there and make certain that your bottom boards are free this time of year. You can get enough dead bees by February to block the entrance if a lot of them died for some reason. So make sure that your entrances are open so bees can take flights. Now that might mean that you have to remove your mouse guard or flip it up or something like that to get in there with a coat hanger or whatever device you have. I did give out some wonderful bottom board cleaners during the year. So some of you may have those. If not, you can just bend something, coat hanger or something, to get in there and just pull the dead bees out and on the ground in front of the colony. That would be fine. All right, so that's your job for right now. Also, make certain that at this point your bees have maybe used enough of their stores that you might think of making some emergency food if that's something that they need at this point. So heft your colony, see if they're light or heavy, and that's something that you might want to consider. So our bloom calendar. I said the bees were out. They weren't flying for anything, but I do see bud swell on the maples. So they will come out in late February. My silvers will be out, likely in full bloom. But if you go out and you're taking a walk, which you can do this year because there's no snow and there's plenty of warm temperatures, warm daytime temperatures, you'll be able to see that the bud swell is beginning on your maple trees. So that'll be the first source that comes out for pollen and nectar. So take a look at that. It's an encouraging sign in the springtime, every springtime of the year. And so we're getting close to actually getting into our next bee season, our full bee season. Although it doesn't seem like it in February, February has a lot more brood than December or January had. So at this point, your bees are, your queens, if they're alive and healthy, are laying a bunch of eggs. And you're starting to gather, I wouldn't say a significant amount of brood, but at least a brood nest. And Peter can verify that because Peter has his thermometers on his colonies. And are you seeing Peter, you seeing the temperature go up at all?
Well, I have a problem with one of my hives didn't make it like in the fall, and the other one is just hanging on. But while you're talking about the bloom calendar, one thing I wanted to just mention we may want to consider is, and let me just share my screen. Do you see something about Seek?
Yeah, that's Seek, yeah.
Okay. I don't know if it's something we want to consider, but there's an organization called iNaturalist.
Yeah.
Which is it can identify it's for tracking plants, insects, birds, everything. But what's neat about it is there is a application you could put on your phone, and this is all free. And while you're taking a picture of, again, it could be an insect or a plant or anything, it does a pretty good job of identifying it. And then you have the ability to upload it to iNaturalist either as an individual if you wanted to, but you could also create a project. And the project can be limited, it can be a private group. So it could be limited to people that, such as this group here, to identify plants they're coming across as they're walking, take a picture of them, and upload it here. And it's just kind of like another way. I know your spreadsheet is great, but another way of possibly, tracking what we're seeing and having, looking on a map and seeing where we're seeing it and things like that. Yeah, I don't know if it would be effective given, size of our group and how many people actually do this, but something I thought I'd throw out there.
That's a great suggestion. I've used Seek all over the world, actually. So not only does it work here in Connecticut or wherever you are in the United States, but it works worldwide. It auto locates you GPS wise, and it puts you into the plant kingdom that you're in. I used it in Thailand and Africa extensively, in all of Europe. And I have a whole portfolio of flowers that I've seen over the years. But I didn't know that you could put a group together, Peter, that's something new. So thanks for that. And it's a matter of downloading the app for free. I have both on my phone, iNaturalist and Seek. The professionals use Seek for some reason. I don't know why. They seem to like Seek better than iNaturalist. You have to make some selections before you get an actual photograph. And it does seem to work a little smoother than iNaturalist, but they're connected. So they're basically the same thing. So I do it. It's so simple because, you feel like sort of intimidated when you get out there in front of a plant and you don't know what it is. But when you have a device like this, it just helps you so much to think of the tulip poplar that you're shown, such a beautiful bloom, and that yellow trumpet flower before that, gorgeous blooms, and you can just get it done.
Now, tell us about the cover. You're not getting anything on your. Well, what are these on photos? Okay, all right. So what this is, using the thermal camera, just to show people that the bees do move up. So, and I changed the colors a little bit when I got into January. But anyway, they were in the lower. This is a 2 deep brood box. They were in the lower box through early January, and then moved up to. I've got a major problem. They are kind of like in the corner. This is the corner of the box. And I just don't think there's enough of them. They were flying a little bit today, but I have some sugar cakes, but I don't know if they're gonna make it. Maybe that cat on the top of the box. Yeah. Well, he's made of concrete, so I don't think. I think it was damaged. Oh, okay. I was kind of curious what they're doing. So yeah, but if you look at Peter's photo here, and you know anything about IR photography, but we'll explain it to you. Peter explain the color profile. You can select. Yeah. I would show you what I think we're more at night or very late afternoon. So all the blues are cold. The white, yellow, orange are the warmer colors. So that's what I've been using. But they give you kind of different palettes depending on what you want to use. Yeah. And then as I told somebody else, if you try to justify this for your wife, say you can point it at all the windows and show where leaks are in your house and have some other uses for it besides your beehive. So anyway. Yeah. All right. So so there is a flare camera, different colors, and you can see how he goes basically up. But one thing to observe from this picture that Peter has up is that just below your cluster, maybe an inch below, he has this turquoise shade, and then it's a little bit of light blue, and then the blue then from then on is exactly the same color blue as the outside. Right. So these are depending on some insulation to keep the heat in the box. In this case, these are wooden colonies, correct, Peter? Yeah. What I have half insulation, and I also have insulation on top that I took completely off. Take it off to take the photograph. Right. I'm not sure how good a job it does with a lot of insulation. Nothing. If you have heat loss, if you have no heat loss, you get no signature. So right. So that'd be great. All right. So there it is. A little bit of winter photography, and Peter's invested in technology from he's monitoring his colonies for heat signatures and weight. Also, right, Peter? Broodminder I use for heat, humidity, temperatures inside. Yeah. And weight. Right. So Broodminder makes a couple different devices. They make a scale of sorts, and then they make so it's what it adds is another dimension, more or less technical dimension to your beekeeping, and it's just fun. It's fun to see that your bees are still alive in the wintertime when you can't like go in there, or you shouldn't really be going in there too much during this time of year. And so you can see what's going on. So it's a really wonderful addition to your beekeeping practice. But we're going to really press Peter to make certain that he's always on top of this for us, so he can share this every time he shows up. And Peter's already registered to come to the event on the 24th. So if you want to meet Peter in person and pick his brain about what he does, he will be there. And that'll be great. All right, so. Yes. One quick option, just another option for those people who are looking to identify plants. Yeah. The now have that feature built into the operating system. Yeah. Yeah. So if you take a picture of a plant and then you go to the picture, there's a small icon on the bottom that's an eye with a circle. And you can click on that and it brings up all the information about the picture, the time, etc. But it says look up plant. And if you hit that, it brings it. You can look it up and it gives you all the information you want about the plant. Oh, cool. And it's nothing you can do. Thanks for reminding me that, yeah. Because you can also have seek. You can take a picture with seek, but you can also identify any photo you have. So you can go the other way with seek. So you can say, so if you have a photo of a plant you took somewhere before you loaded seek on your phone, you can just select your photos, pick that one, and seek will identify it for you. And you can put it in the group. So it works both ways. You've got lots of interesting technology. I didn't know that about that. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that over because that's a pretty interesting feature. Thank you so much. Okay, so before I start on my bandwagon about Varroa treatments, let's take a few questions.
So I'm gonna show a picture of the bottom of my inner cover had mold towards the back of the hive.
Yeah. No insulation.
No, a ton of insulation. I have sensors in the hive, and the temperature was pretty much around like 70 for a long time. Now it's over 80. This was probably taken when the temperature was around 70 something. But there was definitely like a condensation event at some point because it's measuring like humidity and temperature, and we could see that at some point a lot of condensation formed based on the numbers. But yeah, it was like all along the top back.
Yeah, I see it. Why would there be moisture against that wood? Is the insulation on top of that cover?
So on top of that, there is a 13 R value piece of foam, and then I had a empty medium super on top of that. Then I had a cover, but then I had so if you take the cover off, like the outer cover, and I put a sleeve down along it, and then I put the outer cover back on, like a sleeve of insulation around the outside, that was 13 R value. And then around that, I put another box, like a box on it that slid down. So it was essentially 4 inches thick of insulation on the sides. So it was super insulated. And then the other thing I did is I had like a screened bottom board, and I didn't know if they were losing a lot of heat through the bottom. So then at some point I went and I stuck foam on the bottom, and I think that really sealed it up. So it's like super airtight, like only like the tiny little entrance hole is having any kind of air exchange.
So let's start, and let me see if I can give you some insight on what you did. So the insulation has to go on top of the bees first, not wood. So you put wood there and then insulation on top of that. any moisture that's coming off the cluster or any other way will be absorbed by the wood. All right, so that's why you got mold there. If you have insulation on top of the bees first, so you put a foam board or something on top of the bees, and then you put the telescoping cover over that, you won't get that. All right, because then the moisture will fall to the sides and be harmlessly out of the way. Right, and so foam insulation won't give you that kind of thing. So
wait, I sorry, I just to confirm, I have basically sugar cakes, and then I have the inner cover, then I have foam.
Yeah, I know that. So that's
then,
all
okay.
of that. Yeah, so all of that is then you have foam after you put you have an inner cover, right? Sugar cakes,
Yes.
yeah. So you really, at this point, you really need a shim, not the inner cover. Then
it's a winter inner cover, so it's like thicker, and they said, I mean, it's advertised as if you don't need a shim because it's like it has sort of like a built-in shim, but perhaps it's not enough. Like that's how it's advertised.
Yeah,
so
well,
you're telling me I should add a shim as well?
No. I think that your first thing the bees need is to be down on, yeah, well, I usually, if you can feed with that inner cover you have, I don't really know what you're talking about, what the winter inner cover, but so it's probably a Man Lake product or something, or Better Bee or something. I don't know.
Yes, it's Man Lake.
Yeah. So that would have to be, you could put that over the top of the bees and then put insulation on top of that. That's what you said you did.
Yeah, insulation on top of that cover, inner cover, and then also insulation on top of the outer cover.
Yeah, well,
so
you don't need it after that, though. You can put all your insulation on top of the bees and then put that telescoping cover back on.
Okay.
But as long as the bees are alive, that's harmless.
Okay, I just put a picture of like what it looks like if you take that cover off, and those are my sugar cakes. I followed the recipe on the website, and then
why are they brown though? I mean, is it paper on top of them?
That is parchment paper. I put some holes in it, but they're pretty much eating it through the side.
Yeah, so they're still alive?
Oh yeah, they're really healthy, I think.
Okay, then put it back together.
Okay.
This is making me nervous. No, you're good. You should be fine.
It was a warm day.
Don't worry about that mold.
That was done on like a 55-degree day.
Yeah, don't worry about the mold. All right, so just continue on. All right. So I'm going to go down over some of these questions in the chat unless people want to come up. So Gio's asking any advice on starting a top bar hive. So what you'd want to do then is get Wyatt Magnum's book, Top Bar Hive Beekeeping, and you can learn how to start a top bar hive, or you can come to the bee yard when we get our bees and watch us do it. So we have a top bar hive there. We've gone over the whole process of installing packaged bees in there. That you got to think about that bee yard as a real resource and kind of like a moving mentor for you, a live mentor, because we go there, and Armando can tell you, and other folks that are there all the time, including Jamie. We use it as thoroughly as we can, and we're going to have two really interesting features there this spring. We'll have what occurs with the overwintered poly colonies. We're going to have a totally transparent colony that we start, and we're going to be able to watch those bees draw comb and build out. Hopefully they live all right in that. I'm just finishing the stand up now in my basement, and I built the colony I built the box out of material I got from a restaurant that was using a Lexan for a very thick Lexan, a 5/16 inch Lexan for COVID shields between tables. There's lots of that stuff around, by the way. And so that we have that, and then we have the top bar hive. So we're going to have lots of different exciting venues for you to look at in the bee yard. So don't miss our bee yard. Top bar hive is a little bit more difficult to start with than a colony that you start with foundation that give bees a sort of natural way to build comb, or it gives them a guide to build comb. In a top bar hive, you don't give them any guide at all. Usually, some of the more popular top bars have sort of a V shape on them, and most of those designs require that bees follow the geometry of that first top bar. And I did an experiment with Ralph, who was on here, Ralph Zur, from California. I think he's in, I don't know where he is now. I think he's still in California. But anyway, we did it. And Ralph, we had a, triangular top bar. We had a thin piece of wood top bar. And then we had Ralph's 1-inch strips of foundation that he melted on and kept on the top bar. And those top bars won the contest. They were the ones that kept the comb straightest. Right. So so I suggest that if you're gonna start a top bar, you start it with 1-inch strips. And I've got them to draw comb on all 3 kinds of strips, but still, it's a matter of comb management when you start a top bar hive, and it gets really frustrating if the bees decide that they're not going to follow any pattern that you give them. They're just going to do what they want to do, and they're going to build comb, what they call cross comb, in a top bar hive. So, Gio, you got your hand up. Did you want to add something to that?
You did fine. I tried all 3 of those top bar arrangements.
You
And
did?
I was asking about the following board as well.
All right. So, yeah, I never use the following board in top bar hive. I don't think that they're necessary. But if you wanted, you make your top. If you did your kit, or did you make this top bar hive?
I inherited it from Gary Grzinski, and I appreciate that.
right.
It's got some comb already developed on it. The other
Nice.
one's from Man Lake, and I just tried to adapt as many of those suggestions. And
Did you
I
come with
layered,
follower boards?
yeah, and I layered some wax. I melted some wax onto it as well.
Okay. How many? So where's the entrance? In the front or the sides?
The Man Lake they both have front entrances.
Okay. So yeah, you can use that follower board any way you want. So if you want to start with 10 combs and put your following board in, you can, but you have to feed a top bar hive. And the way I feed them in the spring anyway, if you're going to put a package in them, and the way I feed them is I put a big tub of syrup in the back of them, and then I put pine needles in that syrup, and that's what I use to feed them. So under those circumstances, you can't put a follower board in, because even if you only have 10 bars in it, or 15 bars in it, then you have a long tub. The follower board will go behind that, but that's almost the whole length of the top bar hive to begin with. So how you feed them is important. And then, yeah, so you can use a follower board, but it won't make any difference. I don't think that they, unless you wanted to split it into, it's like if you had side entrances, like some top bar hives have a follower board in the middle, and then they have side entrances where you can have 2 colonies at once running, but that's not what you're talking about.
Oh, you're great. Thanks, Bill.
No problem. All right, Michael, you're finding dandelions open.
I have no idea.
But you saw
that-
dandelions.
Milford, Connecticut.
Yeah,
So
there they are. Dandelions are out. Wow. And Adam is saying he gets them from mid-April. Is that right, Adam?
Yeah, I think they're pretty much at least April phenomenon here, dandelions.
Yeah. So I mean, they're a good sign to put your supers on. I mean, that used to be that's sort of like an old a beekeeper's custom. Put on your supers when you see dandelions, but what they mean by when you see them is not when you see a single flower. It's when you're seeing them in mass, all over the place. And that's about April for us here too, because the April daytime temperatures are pretty warm.
So then that's also dandelions to apple blossoms, I think of as kind of peak swarm season.
Oh, yeah, well, that wouldn't be peak here. It's a little bit later.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, the
Oh,
beginning
you're,
of
no,
serious swarm
you're
season.
meaning, okay, yeah, if you mean that they're gonna start to swarm, yeah,
Yeah.
they're gonna start, yes, absolutely, you're absolutely, yeah. This is when that's when they show signs of starting to build swarm cells.
Right. That's when you start paying attention, really.
Yeah, that's when you should start paying attention at least, right?
Right.
So there was a question about swarms that I got earlier. So what Adam is referring to is something that we have to be concerned with as beekeepers as the season goes on. Swarm season starts long before the indications or the urge to swarm can start much sooner than the actual event. So if you're
go.
really paying attention to what's going on, you can notice some indications. Of course, your really strong overwintered colonies that are coming out in April are like full of brood at that point, and you might even see swarm cells start to develop late April for sure, but even mid-April, we can have an early swarm season and get them swarms early. Yeah, so. Okay, so what George wants to know what model camera you use for your IR photos.
It's the FLR, I think it was Gen 3 here. FLRI 1 Gen 3.
Yeah, now it is a fantastic camera for not only taking IR pictures of bee colonies. You'll find, plenty of leaks in your house's insulation.
Yeah, we'll skip that part.
And other places that you can, use it. I use it a lot. I have a flare camera that I also use, but it goes on an old iPhone 5 and it works perfect. So I have to just keep that thing charged all the time because I can lose the battery right away, but a standalone IR camera is much better to use.
Yeah, this is super interesting to me. I'm a little geeky about this stuff, new to beekeeping, but this is the kind of stuff I like to do.
Yeah,
Collect
well,
data,
yeah,
take
yeah.
pictures. Yeah, so
Yeah,
it'll be great.
Yeah, well, we need that, so get connected and maybe you and Peter can start. We need this as a club to get people more involved in these little niche pieces that will measure temperature and take IR photos. It really enhances.
Well, maybe you could put something together around hive telemetry or something like that.
Sure, yeah, I mean, yeah, look, you know what?
Good.
Your data is important. I just want to warn you though that you got to study sensor placement, right? Because sensor placement is critical. And for you to understand the depth of what, not the depth, but the technical collection of data, read I'll send, somebody put up a link for Owen's paper. So that was the thermodynamics of wintering colonies. Somebody searched that out and put a link to it. And I would encourage you to read his study only for, it's plain language study. This is before 1970. So this is before, scientists were trying to impress each other. So he's just trying to give you data. And Owens did this thing, I think it's the thermology of wintering colonies. So you'll see it when you do a try. It's open source and you'll be able to get it. If you can't, send me an email and I'll send you a copy of it. And then you can see what sensor placement does for temperature and humidity. Because you can get sort of sidetracked if you think that if you put one sensor somewhere in the colony, you're measuring something. And you can be very misleading.
Yeah. Good advice. Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay. Janetta wants to know what a swarm cell is. Can we explain a swarm cell? All right. So yeah, we can. Who wants to take a shot at that? Michael, you want to explain what swarm cells are?
Swarm cells are built hanging down. They're probably 3/4 of an inch to an inch long. They kind of look like a peanut, about the size of a peanut.
Yeah.
And that's basically when they can't stop the swarm. That's as Bill was saying, the sign of a swarm is, first thing is, hive survive winters, like 90% gonna swarm. And then you'll notice a big buildup. They're building wax. They start building drone cells. Then after a couple of weeks of drone cells, they'll start building queen cells. And some bees, they swarm because they want to expand and reproduce. So some of these things that they say are too crowded, too this, too that, some bees don't care. They're going to swarm because that's what they do.
Yeah.
So make sure you identify your swarming bees.
Yeah. So, and so inside of a swarm cell is a queen. And for bees to swarm, they need to replace the queen that's going to leave with the colony. So during swarm season, say, the experts sort of disagree on this, but basically approaching half of your colony will leave, 40% maybe. And it actually it's skewed toward younger bees that leave with the queen that's the laying fertile queen that's in the colony. So that's your prime swarm. That's the first swarm that will leave in the springtime if your colony is going to swarm. Then, as Michael said, 90% of your overwintered colonies are probably going to show the urge to swarm. It's just not some. It's a reproductive swarm usually. There's lots of people that will tell you the bees were too crowded. They like to blame you for something that just naturally occurs, and it's very hard to control. We can try to manage it by doing certain things, but it's a big long discussion. We're not capable of having right now. But over the following months, we will talk more about swarms because it'll be on you in no time. But yeah, so those swarm cells are queens, and colony that's going to swarm build a lot of those swarm cells, a lot of queens, and then one of the queens that comes out of those various swarm cells will then go out as a virgin, get mated, and come back and control the rest of the hive. She'll be the fertile female that lays eggs for the remainder of that colony's life. And about 80% of that time, that's very successful. It happens. So it's emergency queen cells. No, emergency queen cells are different. So there's a couple different ways there's actually 3 distinct ways or circumstances under which bees will make new queens. One is during swarm season, and that's sort of early in the season. As Adam said earlier, they begin to start to show signs that they might be swarming in maybe late April, and by the time May comes around, they're in the trees. So that's a reproductive swarm. Then there are times when a queen, for no fault of her own, becomes infertile, and she runs out of sperm, or something happens to her, or you kill her during an inspection, and it's not swarm season during the time that you do that. But she just fails in her role as the primary laying female insect in that colony, and then the bees will supersede her. So they usually will do that while she's failing. If you kill her, odds are that she had eggs in that colony before you did that, and then bees will take an egg or very young larva, less than 36 hours old, and they'll make a queen. They'll start emergency cells, and those cells are not in the position that Michael described. Usually those are anywhere. They can be hanging from the bottom, but normally that's more typical of swarm cells. You might find emergency cells on the face of a frame, right in the middle. And that's the second way that bees will try to save themselves if you kill their queen or she's somehow missing. And then there are, so that's emergency cells. Then there's supersedure cells, when the queen just basically fails. The fertile queen stops laying for some reason, but she's still in the colony, just wandering around. And then bees will make swarm cells that we call then supersedure cells. So supersedure cells, they're a little bit more relaxed when they're making them, because those cells are not in an emergency. The bees have decided to make a supersedure cell. Now you'll see that with packages a lot. You may notice that this year, if you get a package of bees, you may notice that phenomena. I get those questions every year. You know, what's going on with my bees? I install the package and I see a bunch of queen cells. Well, lots of times when you first install a package, the bees, not lots of times, let me take that back, but occasionally you will see bees will try to supersede the queen that just was released and is out on the comb. Now, for whatever reason, we don't know. We're not privileged to getting that information from bees, but we know that it happens. And in that case, if you see a queen on the comb and you see supersedure cells, and you see that she's laying eggs, and this is often the case, that she's a perfectly good queen, you can then take the liberty to destroy those cells. And 9 out of 10 times, maybe all of the time, she will, they will go on to accept that queen. And I learned that little trick from Leslie Houston, who is in the Backyard Beekeepers Association. And from the time she told me that, and as many times as I've run into that, it's absolutely the way she described it. You know, bees just weren't, ready to accept that queen, but then they do. All right.
And
so,
Bill,
yeah,
if they do happen to continue making queen cells, you might just let them do their thing because maybe there's something wrong with the queen.
absolutely. So yeah, if they don't accept, but see, if you have eggs in the colony, when you whack down the first group of supersedure cells, you're fine, because they'll just make another set, out of the eggs that are left. There's all kinds of interesting ways in finding that, in manipulating that part of the swarm season. It's a marvelous time to be a beekeeper.
Hey, Bill. I
Yeah.
think in past discussions at this, you've hosted somebody by the name of Stephen Rapaski,
Yes.
who Swarm
Wrote a
Essentials.
book. Yes.
Great book.
Swarm Essentials. Yeah, he's I mean, whenever I'm with him, I traveled in Africa a few times with him also. And whenever I'm with him, I do nothing but break his ass about writing that book. But yeah, so he's had a lot of success with that book. And Swarm Essentials is a great way to get familiar with swarm season. Thanks so much, Gary. We have a tendency to get myopic and focused on what we know, but there's lots of people out there that know a lot of things, and Steve is one of them. And he spoke about that a couple times here at our club. Maybe we'll get him back. Do signs, okay, so it's emerging cells. Do signs vary between species? I guess, Merrick, you're thinking about swarm signs? What kind of signs? Swarm cells? Swarming?
Yeah,
cells?
I was looking at the difference between the Italian bees and the Russian bees, and that the Russian bees tended to make more emergency cells or queen cells. I'm just not sure. I'm new too, and I'm learning at the same time.
Yeah, okay. So what I'd like you to think about is that we don't have, like, we love to talk about the ancestral heritage of bees. But the fact is, unless you've gone to a specific breeding program or you have read them yourself along ancestral lines, you're generally getting a bee that's a combination of Carniolan and Italian. Russian bee lines, we do have the Cold Country Queen Breeders Association and the Russian bee breeders that you can buy queens from do a better job of breeding a queen that's more sort of typical of a Russian bee, right? And so, yeah, so they do have a little bit of different characteristics. A bred bee in a line that has been kept fairly clean. And the Russian Bee Breeders Association does that. Try to get a queen from them, though. So they've gotten popular, and because they've made all kinds of claims for the Russian bees that they are better at Varroa. I ran them for years in the yard, and I got nothing out of them. They really waited a long time in the springtime to to build up. These were cold country bred Russian queens, and they also were a little difficult to handle, so they got to be defensive, and they had good survival, and they did good with Varroa, but they were kind of tricky. So you're probably dealing with a sort of basic bee. And so what you can get out of that, you're reading about ancestral characteristics, but Carniolans and Italians, is that you will get bees that will display some ancestral characteristics of either type bee. So beekeepers back in the day, man, from what I read back in the day, and my own beekeeping practice goes back over a decade, so people get attached to their queens. These are my Italians. These are my Carniolans. These are my whatever, my Saskatraz bees or my Polines or whatever it is. But, they don't all sort of read the book that the breeder is reading about their characteristics. The bees come out and do what they do. And so, yeah. All right, Sealy did say 80%. Yeah, so so who can argue with Sealy? Yeah, so I think it's higher than that, but I very seldom get a colony these days that doesn't want to swarm, especially 3-year-old colonies. And I had a colony, a wonderful colony I raised from a nuke, and it went 3 years without any swarm. And actually, there's one at the yard that's going on its 3rd year and has not swarmed. So yeah, so there are bees, and people will tell you, breeders will tell you, and that are folks that raise queens will tell you that you can actually raise queens from those colonies and they will be less likely to swarm, but it's not necessarily true, because bees only get half their genome from the queen. The rest comes from drones, and who knows, a lot of drones, and who knows what those drones have been doing. And they carry all kinds of different genetic materials. So you get a mixture of lots of things after your colonies swarm. But mine, if it doesn't swarm, you're always carrying that queen's gene line. You're not involving any other drones in the process of that colony. So yeah, if you could do that, you're good.
What do you do if you're high? I mean, I guess it's nature for them to want to swarm. That's nature, right? To reproduce. Do you go try to capture your swarms, or, I don't know how far a swarm would go. Do you go look for them? Do you just
you're hopeless.
bee?
Here's what they'll do. They'll swarm. They'll land on a tree right in your property at 65 feet high. And that's what they'll do to you, to entice you to try to look for them and get them back down. So now you can whistle at them or bang pots in your backyard, build a fire, sacrifice a chicken, do whatever you want to try, but they'll just hang around on that tree as long as they want, and then they'll go to another place. Right? Sometimes you get lucky and that bee colony will swarm in a wonderful position on a low-hanging branch in your backyard, and then you can shake them into a box and keep them.
Okay.
Right?
Can you attract them with lemongrass essential oil? I heard that's a pheromone to them.
Well, if you put up a swarm trap, so
Yeah.
when I was running, I'm not doing this anymore, but when I was running yards with that had over 30 colonies in them, say, and I had 2 or 3 of those at one point in different parts of the state, and then in that case, I would put swarm traps up around those yards. And contrary to what Sealy would tell you, I would get swarms to come to those swarm traps, and they were only 50 feet away from the hives.
Okay.
So you can try to put up a swarm trap and then build it correctly. So you have to figure out how that's done. You don't buy those top hat looking things in the bee catalogs, and maybe a nuke box will work, but they usually need a little bit more room than that. So if there's maybe no other option from them, maybe a nuke box would work. That's a
Okay.
smaller colony. But normally they go for a 40-liter box, which is about the size of a deep. And then
Okay.
build it according to swarm box instructions that you can find on the net. Hang that baby up in a tree somewhere, and then you can put your lemongrass in it. But even stronger than that, you can put in a swarm lure, and there's plenty of them out there that you can buy. Swarm Master is one. Steve covers a few of them in his book, and then you put them in there, and yes, you can have some success with them, I think, because the swarm boxes that I've had up all had swarm lures in them, and some didn't, but not all of them. Let me retract that. Not all of them had swarm lures, but most of them did. And I was more successful with lures than I was with boxes that did not have lures, but I did get swarms in both.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
All right. So this is a document that I've been working on for quite some time, and I have been promising people that I would get this out because these questions come up every year, and unfortunately, we have Varroa that have been plaguing us for a number of years, and there's nothing in the future that says that they won't continue to do that. And then we have constantly lowered what we refer to as the threshold of treatment. And we used to say that you take a 300 bee sample, and if it's 3% or more, then you treat. So that would be 9 bees in a sample. Then we went to 2%, and 2% didn't seem to keep our bees alive. And there's been anecdotal reports and science from all over the country that the 2% threshold is still too high. So now they've lowered it, and they're suggesting that you keep your bees alcohol wash threshold under 1%. All right, so now let's talk just a little bit about what that means, under 1%. That means that you no longer can actually measure that because we don't have a tool that allows that. So 1% is 3 bees out of your 300 bee sample. And I'm not going to go over how to sample or use an alcohol wash, but for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, it's a matter of gathering a half a cup of bees, putting them into an alcohol wash and shaking them around, and then counting the Varroa that drop off of those bees, right? So that's what a wash is. And we have, up until very recently, thought that we could measure that with that alcohol wash with some sense of accuracy. But unfortunately, if you are trying to measure 1% drop or Varroa population on a 300 sample bee, you can easily, we have moved into territory that's beyond the capability of that wash sample. So I hope that's clear to everybody. We lost our tool when they went down to 1%. Actually, I think we lost it at 3%. I don't think it was ever accurate enough. Because if you're talking about the difference between, will that wash leave one more mite on the bees that you didn't count? The answer to that is yes, because you can wash them again and you might get 1 or 2 more mites. So, you know, the tool we have isn't working. So now, what do? So do you just continue to try to struggle with figuring out if your treatment thresholds are being met and treat for them, or do you go ahead and assume what now I'm hearing most of the scientific community and beekeepers that keep their bees alive year after year? And what are they doing? Well, they're doing this, right? They're doing a seasonal proactive Varroa management schedule. And here's what it amounts to. Now I've translated it into our environment for Connecticut, and I'm using grafting software and a wonderful Varroa management spreadsheet that Randy Oliver put together. And with those 2 documents, I've been able to come up with this treatment strategy, and it mirrors pretty much exactly what I've been doing to keep colonies alive. And this works for me. All right, so I'm going to offer it as, instead of pulling your hair out, follow this proactive Varroa management schedule, and you're going to get good results. So when you're going to start with a 3-pound package, and that with or without foundation, no matter how you started, in either a top bar or a worry hive, the bees can be treated with oxalic acid vaporization or dribble, or you can use HopGuard 3. But I think HopGuard 3 at this point is probably less effective, but it's better than it was. Right? So people are getting results with HopGuard 3. Now, your option, the reason I chose oxalic acid with vaporization or dribble at this point is because you can use that on a package before you actually release the bees. So you can, and this is all documented on the oxalic acid label. And you can only use 8-bioxol, and you can buy that from Better Bee, and that acid has all of the legal label requirements for use. And it shows you how to use a spray on packages. And it goes over exactly what you can do to spray them. So what I would recommend right from the get-go is to give them a treatment of oxalic acid while they're still in the package. And the label walks you through it, how to mix it, how to spray it on the bees. You have to give the bees a healthy dose of syrup first. And then after they have, without oxalic acid, and after they have digested a little bit of that, you spray them with oxalic acid mixture with sugar water, and that kills the Varroa in the package. You can also wait until after you started the colony and the queen is in her cage being released. Once she's released, maybe 3 days after you've installed that package, 2 or 3 days, and she's out on the comb. By that time, the bees, you're feeding this package also, and they have lots of resources to build comb, and they will start building comb on your foundation, or if you already have drawn comb, or you're letting them build natural comb, whatever, they'll have enough comb built where the queen likely to start laying. So once your queen starts laying, before any brood is capped, you can vaporize the package. Right? So there's your options. Oxalic acid spray or vapor. You can actually put a dribble on them also if you wanted to early on in the season, but if it's cold in March and April, so it's a little bit more tenuous. You need degrees above 50 degrees, I think, for a dribble. But you might be able to get that in the middle of April if your packages are late. Right? And then you could use HopGuard 3, which also has a temperature limit of 50 degrees. So there's what you do for your initial treatment. All right? So then I gave you the options below that. And a couple things you have to know about HopGuard 3. HopGuard 3, if you're going to use it as a preemptive cleaning of the package, you want to make sure you install that also before any brood is capped. But that will work because it's a long-term treatment. And you'll see on this document that there are hyperlinks to every one of the products. So you can just go ahead and click this once. I'm going to put this in the chat, but I'm also going to publish this on our website. You can click those links and you go right to the label and you go right to where you can buy it and all of that stuff. So, you have to pay attention to that piece. And I wanted to make sure you know that the guiding principle with oxalic acid is that the colony must be totally broodless. And it can get broodless in other times of the year. And you can use oxalic acid if it goes broodless for some reason after a swarm or during a walkaway split, or you intentionally make it broodless with brood breaks. Anytime there's no brood, of course, then oxalic acid is your best choice because it's got a really high kill ratio. And as long as you get over 80% on this initial treatment of the package, your bees are going to be good for a while. All right. So now, that's how you clean your package. And so that's what you do with packages. So now if we're going to start with a nuke, things are a little different, right? Because a nuke comes with brood and Varroa. There's no nuke out there that doesn't come with brood and Varroa, I mean, if you're getting brood, you're getting Varroa. All right, so it's a good practice, and then because in Connecticut, our nucleus colonies come later. They come like in May or June even. At that point, the temperature profiles are up where you can use other treatments if you want, right? And what I would suggest you do for nucleus colonies is treat them almost immediately. And since they're small, you don't want to dose them with a high formic acid treatment, but Hopguard 3 is I'm saying the only option, assuming the daytime temperatures are above 50, but they're going to be above 50 when you get your nuke. And then you follow this with a 14-day treatment of formic acid, Formic Pro, or a 7-day treatment with My Way Quick Strips when the colony has over 6 frames of bees. So this is a very detailed process of dealing with Varroa over the season. Now, the package doesn't stay Varroa free even when you start with that cleansing process in the beginning. So I'm going to show you later on with the overwintered colony what kind of a treatment schedule you use on that package as it progresses into a full-blown colony, which is about 10 weeks after you install it. All right, so in a nucleus colony, and this is the same, you can look at this now as the same as your package growing, right? Once you're going to need an under the extended treatment tab, you're going to need a second 80% kill at the end of August. So if you do this initial treatment of your package or the initial treatment of your nucleus colony, you're probably good till the end of August. And then, or the first week of September, then you have 2 options. Then you can use a thymol-based product, which Ralph kind of likes, or a formic acid product, one of the ones I mentioned above. All right, so then there's a third treatment that's required when the colony is broodless. And that was possibly sometime in late November. And that you could use an OA dribble, a vaporization. You wouldn't want to use formic acid at that point because there's no reason to. It's a little harsher on bees than oxylic acid is, vaporization or dribble. And that's possibly in late November, but that might not be the case all of the time. So you have to make sure you observe the broodless part of that. All right, so I'm actually following you with these extended treatments all the way through the year and care for Varroa. So then if you really want to get your colony almost Varroa free, sometime at the end of December, if there's a 50-degree day or so, you can vaporize those oxylic acid and clean up pretty much the remaining Varroa. So for the more astute observers of what I'm trying to say here, you'll notice that I have rotated treatment formulas between oxylic acid, formic acid, and Apigar, which is a thymol product. And I think that should be a strategy going forward for anybody who wants to follow this kind of a treatment plan. You know, rotation delays resistance to any single product, and you should make it your practice. And then, of course, the label is always there for you to figure out how you use the products. There's no mystery to them. They're simple to use. Just a matter of you getting out and doing it. All right, so now nukes can be highly infested, and you really won't know that, the level of infestation. You don't see mites on bees, right? If you do, it's too late. At that point, the colony will collapse. If there's no, they call them dispersal mites, but you don't see them because they're not on top of bees. They're under bees on the bottom. So you never see that kind of infestation, level of infestation. So what you would do then, you won't know what kind of a population of mites you have that are hanging on bees in that nucleus colony, so you can assess it by doing what is referred to as a sticky board drop. And what you do then is you put a sticky board under that nucleus colony, and you then will give it a dribble or vaporization of oxylic acid, and you leave that sticky board under there for 3 days, and that'll help you determine what kind of infestation level you have. Now, remember that at this point, and I'm going to refer to this accelerated drop later on also, this is not a treatment. All this is doing is telling you how many mites are on those bees outside, dispersal bees, not bees under cap cells. So you won't kill them under cap cells, so you're not really getting at them, because at any given point, about 80% of the mites that are in a colony are under cap cells. So you don't kill them with this kind of treatment. You're just using it as a tool, or what we refer to as an accelerated drop, right? All right, and then the treatment threshold, using a drop board, and I wrote an article on bee culture and bee culture many years back, and you can get that article. And it's also posted on our website. And you can read what I had to say about using drop boards. But basically, I'm basically saying here that if you get more than a few mites after you've done that accelerated drop, you should just treat the colony. So that covers pretty much what you can do to get packages and nukes through the season. Then in an overwintered colony, now a healthy overwintered colony, and I want to make clear that it's possible, you'll get one, you're likely to get one if they've been treated the previous year with the schedule that we talked about. And if that's the case, then you'll come into spring with a significant amount of brood, but lower Varroa population, because you won't have a lot of reproduction occurring during the wintertime because there's not a lot of brood around. And if you've eliminated a lot of the mites and they go out of the season with 5 or 6 mite population, you're not going to have a big mite population coming out of spring, early spring, when you first do your early March inspections. And the goal then is to keep that population there. And I get on my bandwagon in the next paragraph about we don't have a measurement tool. And then I get on that same 3-day drop that you can use to identify if you have a high Varroa. So if for some reason you did come into spring with high Varroa, you need to know that. So you can do that same drop, that same accelerated drop, and then I explain it a little bit more in detail here, and warn you that that you can get in real big trouble if your colony comes out of winter with a big Varroa population. And the only way that can happen is if you had bees that survive somehow with a big population of Varroa in October and November, and now they're coming out with strong in the spring. All right, so for overwintered colonies, the treatment schedule is like what was described for nukes, and by the way, by extension, what you would do for packages after that initial cleaning. And so that you, and I just say go up and do that treatment urgency for nukes piece. So now I'm suggesting for an overwintered colony, which now makes this treatment schedule kind of complete, as early as possible. And this might likely be in the 2nd week of April. You can do a formic acid treatment. You'll have the daytime hives that are available for effective use of formic acid. And at that point, you can kill about 80% of the mites that are in the colony, and you've given them a good head start in April to be Varroa free. And then again, that'll probably get you through until late August. And then the August treatment is a good time when you can use a thymol-based product, right? And then I follow that with an OA treatment when the colonies brood this in October. And I want to emphasize that becoming broodless is not something you can assume, right? You have to assess that by observation. And then if you wanted to go ahead and continue with a vaporization treatment of OA at the end of December, it'll help you kill most of the remaining Varroa. Right, so what I've outlined here with, first of all, starting with a package, then moving to what you have to treat a nucleus colony different, because you don't have the option of using oxalic acid until it becomes broodless way at the end of the year. But what I've outlined for you to follow is you can follow this mindlessly by dates, prescriptively. You can just go ahead and do it during the times that I've said. But the only, and you can rest assured that this schedule was grafted on Randy Oliver's wonderful Varroa spreadsheet, and also has behind it all of the science behind mite reproduction and timelines and all of that. You can forget about all of that if you wanted to, and just take this on and say, this is what I'm going to do. I have a nucleus colony, so I'm going to treat like it says here. And then I'm going to extend that treatment into the end of August or the first week in September. I'm going to do a thymol-based product. And then I'm going to do a third OA dribble or vaporization when the colony becomes broodless. And then I might do a December OA treatment to keep the colony with virtually little to no Varroa, right? So it's actually a prescriptive way to deal with Varroa and not have to learn all of the details about the biology. You don't have to do any of this if you don't want, and but your bees will succumb to Varroa and die, right? So, and the overwintered bee thing I've outlined here. I also put in the colony, you can, because formic acid can come in a couple different treatments, and even HubGuard 3, there's a couple different treatment schedules. And so you can figure that out by looking at what the manufacturer suggests, how you use it, and that full or half treatments. And I'm saying here that 10 seams of bees or more require full treatments. I always give robust colonies that have like 10 seams of bees on brood, maybe 8 frames of brood. If I'm going to treat that colony, I give it a full dose, and it seems to work good. All right, so this is something I've been working on for a little while, trying to figure out how I could communicate this schedule to you guys, and that you'd have something then that you could use and not be surprised that your colony died of Varroa infestation and some kind of mite. There's another name for it now, but it's parasitic mite syndrome, maybe. So there it is. It puts together oxalic acid, formic acid, HubGuard, and a new product I want to talk about, Varroxan. If we get this product, we're going to be trying this out next year. It has been recently approved by the EPA, and so now it's just a matter of each state getting approval. And I don't know where Connecticut's at. I've asked our state entomologist a couple of questions about whether or not we're going to get a new inspector, and she thinks we might have one by June or July. So we will not have a bee inspector for the first part of the year, and maybe we won't have one for the second part of the year because they move slowly. They have to interview people and do all of that, right? But this product, Varroxan, will have to be approved for use in the state of Connecticut. And then this is a slow release oxalic acid process that stays in the colony for a number of weeks, maybe 6 or 8. I don't really know. But if you get on their site, they'll tell you about it. If you get this product, we're going to be happy because it's a glycol-based slow release oxalic acid product. Real low dose of oxalic acid, very effective over the long term. So, all right. So I think that's about it. Any questions about this?
Yeah, what would be the approximate cost for an annual treatment? Any idea, Bill?
Oh, well, yeah. But it's way less than a new package of bees.
Okay. I'm talking for 2 hives.
Yeah, for 2 hives. Yeah. No, so what we have to do is you got to buy the products. You can't wait, because then if you don't have them on hand, that's a great question, Tom, because I wanted to make this point. If you don't have these products available to you when you start beekeeping, when you install, you won't use them, or you'll be trying to get them. You say, oh, let me go look at Bill's sheet, say for instance, if we were going to use it, and you'd say, oh, I don't have this, and then you go try to order it and it's 6 weeks out. You've missed. So if you miss one of those treatments in there, they're all designed at the time of year that I laid them out to give you an 80% mite kill. Under caps, with caps on or no caps, however it is, whatever you use there, you're getting an 80% mite kill. And that's, you need those 80% mite kills during the year and a fourth one or fifth one in December, right? A broodless vaporization. So if you miss the early ones, any one of those, your mite populations will get out of control. And no matter what you do in the latter part of the year, if you waited till October to say, well, I'm just going to wait till my colony gets broodless and then I'll just give them an OA treatment. OA is pennies, by the way, unless the only thing you have to invest in with OA is a vaporizer. After you get past that, it's pennies per colony to treat them. If you wait that long, your bees are going to die from a viral load, not from a parasitic mite syndrome, but for the fact that Varroa will vector viruses into your bees. So what that treatment schedule that I just outlined is designed to do is to keep bees from being able to inject viruses in your brood population, right? So that's what that's about, keeping that viral load down. Lots of bees can tolerate Varroa, but then they die when it comes to the first cold snap because they're not equipped from a virome standpoint to survive. I don't put that in there, Marta. That's part of IPM, and it's a good question. Thank you. And you can actually use that along with this schedule. You can try to use all kinds of, this is a treatment schedule, and drone trapping is another technique to get bees to get mites to go into drone, and it gets about 10% of the mites out of your colony. Usually, it's not as effective as any one of these treatments. So these treatments are designed to give you an 80% kill. A screen bottom board, you might get a 5% Varroa drop out of that. Drone trapping, you get more like 10, maybe 20 if you're really lucky and you have 2 frames going, but those things alone will not satisfy your bees' needs to get rid of Varroa. It won't work. They won't work. How about reducing? But that was a great question. For the overwintered formic acid springtime treatment, do you recommend 2-strip treatment or a single strip 14-day treatment, or does it matter? So overwintered formic acid. Yeah, so if it's a big, strong colony and you're coming into winter, I would think you'd go with the 20-day treatment, which is two packages. So it depends on what kind of formic acid you use, Mite-Away Quick Strips or Formic Pro, but too much treatment makes mites resilient. Those are for hard chemicals. You might notice that I didn't actually include any of them, but I did put a warning on the bottom not to use any harsh chemicals, and I include Apovar in that, which is amitraz. That's a neurotoxin. So there's fluvalinate in one of them, Apostan, and then there's Acumafos in another one. Very, very toxic stuff. And you might as well just pollute your comb with just really toxic chemicals. Apovar is a commercial product that commercial beekeepers use a lot, and they get good results with it. And then there's some pockets of resistance. So, yeah. There's research. So by the way, Sue, no, these products have been used in Europe and throughout the world for a couple of decades now. And there's no sign that resistance, it's tough to get a resistance to acid. And even though thymol just keeps working, that's a fumigant that keeps working. I don't know how thymol kills mites, but it does. And formic acid, we're not really sure how that kills mite, but it does. And oxalic acid, same thing. It kills mites like crazy. And we don't really know exactly how. Maybe it acidifies their hemolymph. Maybe it burns their podium on their feet. Maybe they can't blind them because they don't have eyes. Maybe it burns their antenna or gets in the way of their ability to be able to sense where the proper age larva is to go into a cell. Who knows how it kills them, but we know it does. And there's no sign that there's ever been resistance to the treatments that I outlined there. And there, by the way, every one of those treatments except for Thymol can be used with honey superzon, right? So formic acid, oxalic acid, and Hopguard, which is a beta acid. And if that's just something that you've been eating for a long time, the beta acids that are in Hopguard have been in hot dog preservatives, lunch meat preservatives for your entire life. You've been eating beta acids if you ate any of those meats. There's not a lot of research that says that treatment is that effective. What that depends on is that you continually treat your colony with oxalic acid. Now, there are a lot of people that do that, and I explain that in that paper, so you'll see it there. But it's not as effective because bees are coming out of mites are coming out of capsule, foundress mites and their offspring, one or two in drone cells. So, and they're coming out and they're scrambling around. They feed on the underside of bees for a while, and then they go back into a cell right away. So there is a cycle when Varroa that come out of cap cells are out in their dispersal stage or their feeding stage, whatever you want to call that, before they go back into another cell as a foundress mite to make more mites. But you can't look at that as if it stops at some point and you can get them all. Every day that's occurring. Every day mites are going back into cells. So in that 5-day period between your oxalic acid vaporization, a ton of mites that have come out of cap cells are going back into cells that are capped. And over a 5-day period, when the queen is laying 1,500 eggs a day, there's a lot of cells that get capped every day, right? So she will lay 250,000 recruited bees that she recruits during the season. So do the math on how many cells get capped a day. It's tons of cells that get capped every day. So, and every one of them presents an opportunity for a mite to get back into a cell. So it's difficult to prove, and it can't be your only strategy. I mentioned it. I mean, it is something that I think you can use as an emergency if you have a super high mite drop out of a nucleus colony or an overwintered colony. I didn't put that in there because I didn't want to confuse people to think that that was a valid treatment. What I gave you was something that you can depend on. There's been a proposal, and Randy Oliver made it he took it on as a project to try to get the EPA's attention to what's going on in New Zealand. And in New Zealand, what the government has said in New Zealand is that you're a beekeeper and you have oxalic acid, you use it any way you want in your colony. Basically, that's what they said. And so it's more sophisticated than that. It says, you got to use it within reasonable guidelines, but you can do what you want with it. If you want to put Swedish sponges in there with it, if you want to put, if you want to saturate your own matrix, if you want to use glycol instead of syrup, sugar syrup, you can do that. You can do lots of things in New Zealand you can't do in the United States. And I don't think there's enough people in the EPA that understand those subtleties that will allow that. But we can hope. And we'll see if they relax it. I think if Varroxan was a big step in the direction of letting us do what we want. What do you think of Apivar and the treatment rotation? I don't think a whole lot of it because it's a neurotoxin, and I don't feel comfortable with it. but people use it. I'm not suggesting you can't. But it does stay in the comb, and it's not just that apivar ends up in the it doesn't pretty much stay in the comb, but its metabolites do. So that's something that you have to learn a little bit about. Yeah, so it's so Michael clarified that, I think.